Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, we're going to start in about 1 minute. On va recommencer dans 1 minute.
We're on. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We wanted to keep everything on track and on time so that you get everything out of the day that you want to get out. But Susan Holt wanted to take a minute to actually insert, no, don't laugh, this is good, to give you a bit of a perspective on the judges and the deliberation and why they did what they did and how they did it. And I would love to, all of us, extend a welcome to Susan to have her come up here and explain this. So Susan, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ed. I think the judges thought that there was an opportunity to share some learnings that we didn't want to miss. So obviously we deliberated and considered all of the options and chose the first and second place winners, and Andrew will tell you who they are in a moment. But there were two things that stood out for us as learnings going forward that we thought anyone who's interested in doing open data visualization might benefit from. So we found in our top 2 presentations, opportunities for improvement had 2 data sets that were presented in 2 visual ways been combined into one image where the opportunity to have more impact could have been achieved, and where the information presented some interesting learnings, but where a conclusion or the recommended actions jumped outside of the data. We thought we've got to be really conscious about where we're getting our conclusions from versus what the data is telling us, and that's something to think about going forward versus asking the question of here's what I would ask next and what more data we need, and then where can you take 2 really interesting images and combine them to make the most powerful visualization possible. So with all of that, we thought the work was really well done, and we are excited to announce the winners. I'll invite Andrew up here to tell you who gets second and first place and the prizes they've earned.
Okay, so now we don't need a drum roll because everybody's just spinning in their heads right now, right? So the first award is for People's Choice, and that's where all of you had some input on which one of those infographics out in the hallway actually made an impact on you, how well did they present, how well did they convey their message, and how much did it stimulate you to want to ask more questions. So the winner of the People's Choice Awards, with a prize here being donated by the Tableau team, is Team Avengers. You're young enough, you can hop up right there. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Wow. I wish I had that influence on my teenagers at home. You can put the dishes away. Thank you, guys. Yeah, well done. Don't congratulate me. Well done. Well done. And again, thank you to Tableau for being here today and for making this generous donation and prize. This is wonderful. Looking forward to having you back again next year. No, it's just in there. Yeah. Okay, you stay right there. So the second prize is for the infographic, sorry, that was People's Choice, guys. This is the second prize is the infographic, and this is a $250 prize, and it is being awarded to Abdul Mumin. And again, Mumin, thanks very much for coming all the way from Moncton. I want you to encourage more of your friends in Moncton to come next year and do this as well. Well done. And for the runner-up for Best Presentation comes with a $250 prize as well, and that goes to Holly Ailes. So, Holly, did your dad give you $250 so he could sit at the table with you? Good to have you here, James. And well done, Holly. Good job. Okay. And for our final prize and the biggest cash award of $500 for the best presentation goes to Team Avengers. Whoa. Whoa. Good job. Get up there. Well Thank you. Well done. I think they were very surprised last Wednesday night when they won as well, and look at they're walking away here with more money than we know what to do with. Thank you. So well done. Well done. So listen, thanks very much for all of you for coming and watching and learning and participating, and really, I've been talking to a few of you in the audience during lunch. What we'd like to see next year is more participation. So for the regions that you're representing, from the places that you are from, start talking about what you saw here today. Start talking about who should come and be part of this. Get community involvement in your own communities. Do like they did here in Fredericton, like they're doing in St. John, like they're doing in Moncton, and get the conversations happening at the local level and bring them back to the provincial stage and really start to tell people, show people what they can do with this data. So thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks for being here for the prizes.
Thanks, Ed. Merci beaucoup. Alors, thanks again for all those who participated in the Open Data Visualization Challenge. Geez, I'm tripping on that word every time. As challenger, judges, sponsors, and contributors of data, and a very special thank to you, the organizer of ODVC, Andrew Lockhart of UNB. Yes. The ODVC has really taken Govmaker to a next level, saying government take ideas into action. So we'll reconvene in 10 minutes? 7 minutes. So at, 1:15. That's what Lorna told me. You know, she's 7 minutes to hear Sean Boots. Okay.
If you'd like to take your seats, we'll be starting again in 1 minute.
Okay, now I'd like to introduce you Sean Boots, developer and technical advisor with the Canadian Digital Service. Sean a travaillé comme concepteur de produits auprès de Voto Mobile, une entreprise sociale établie au Ghana qui cherche à autonomiser les communautés dont on entend peu parler. Il a aussi été développeur auprès d'Affaires mondiales Canada. He previously worked as a product designer with Voto Mobile, a Ghana-based social enterprise focused on empowering underserved communities, and as a developer at Global Affairs Canada. He rejoined the federal government in fall 2016 to help launch Canadian Digital Service as a new digital service delivery initiative. Sean studied public and international affairs at the University of Ottawa and enjoys working at the intersection of technology and public policy. So please welcome Sean Boots.
Cool, thanks very much. Merci beaucoup. called the Hillary Hartley technique of putting a laptop onto a podium. All right, so thanks very much for having me here today. It's really humbling to be on the same stage as all of the presenters that we've had over the couple of days, including some people who are heroes of mine for a long time. So I feel like a young grasshopper in comparison, but it's really, really great to be here. So I'll be chatting about an engagement tour from our team that we did almost a year ago, and what we learned from people working on and thinking about digital government from across Canada. Our team is now known as the Canadian Digital Service, or CDS, and it launched in July, and the engagement tour from earlier in the year provided a lot of the inspiration for how CDS was created. It's really interesting to look back, now that we're really real, and that we have projects in flight, at those early lessons from earlier, and the things that we learned. Donc, je vais donner une petite introduction, parler un peu des détails méta, un peu de notre journée, et ensuite expliquer ce qu'on a entendu des gens qu'on a rencontrés autour du pays. J'espère qu'on aura un peu de temps pour des questions à la fin. Autrement, vous pouvez toujours me trouver sur Twitter. Je suis un peu fanatique. Donc, voilà. Cool. So, my name is Sean. I've been with the Canadian Digital Service team since September of last year, before it formally existed. At the time, we all just called it Ryan's Digital Government Team, after Ryan and Joseph, who some of you might know from previous conferences, who was our original fearless leader. So I was the fourth person or so to join the team. I think we're up to, as of last week, 30 people. And so it's been really exciting to be part of essentially a startup in government as it scales from a really small team up to a larger group. My background, as Cyril mentioned, is in political studies and in public policy, but I come from a whole family of engineers. And my older brother taught me how to code when I was still in high school. And so, you know, when I sort of aspired to do everything that he did. So after I finished grad school, I went and I worked as a software developer and a UX designer for 3 years for a tech startup. And when I joined Ryan's team in the federal government last year, it really was a dream come true. For the first time, my interest in public policy and my enthusiasm for technology, you know, could take place at the same time, which is super fun. But the reason that I bring all of this up is that I really feel like I ended up here by accident. And for all of us here who are working at the intersection of technology and public policy, it's worth asking, how did we end up here? Having the skills to bridge this gap between the technology worlds and public policy is really, really important and really rare. And I think for so many of us that are doing this work, we ended up here more by fluke than by plan. So that's something that I'll come back to later in the presentation. So if this works. Yeah, okay, so the trip, we started in late September of 2016, and we had meetings and conversations until February of 2017. In that time, we visited 20 different cities, we visited 10 provinces and territories, and we met with more than 1,000 people from 200 different organizations. We made an effort to reach out to a lot of the organizations that often don't really interact with the federal government. So small tech startups and incubators, civic tech organizations, provincial and municipal governments, and academic researchers and staff who work in design and IT and entrepreneurship-related fields. You'll notice that we titled our report, go back, nope, Beginning the Conversation. So we had actually originally planned a larger public consultation component, both online and in person, but some of you may have experienced this. The approvals for external communications took longer than most of our actual in-person engagements. And so we wanted to make sure that people who weren't part of the original plan and the original meetings that we set up could still share their thoughts and ideas. And so that's why, now that we've published our report, we actually have a comment feature at the bottom so people can continue to share their thoughts and their ideas. As we put this together, we were really indebted to a lot of local and regional IT organizations who helped bring together the technology community in their area, as well as provincial and municipal governments that hosted us. In most cases, we would go to a city and we'd have one meeting with local technology community and startups, and then another meeting with municipal and provincial governments. And what that let us do is it let people be a little bit more frank in both of those meetings, where the government counterparts that we talked to could be a bit more open about what was working and what wasn't working with, you know, the IT vendors that they worked with. And then IT companies could also be a bit more frank about, you know, what was working and what wasn't with their interactions with government. So the split worked really well. And the biggest takeaway sort of logistically is that we had to be pretty agile in how we actually approached these consultations. If we had created a really sort of rigorous plan at the start and felt like we were sort of stuck with it, then we wouldn't have had some of the opportunities that we had to talk to different groups. And so, you know, there's a bit of an element of serendipity to how we did these meetings, where sometimes we would talk to more academic or university groups. In some cities, we would talk to more IT industry groups or startups. But having local contacts who could help bring those people together really helped. And we were just basically open to meet with any kind of audience. And finally, we tried to be as low budget as possible, mostly by only sending 1 or 2 people to each city that we went to. You know, one person to present, the other person to take notes, and by combining our trips into sort of as many like one-way loops around the country as we could. And so when we ran the numbers at the end, we were way under budget, which is a little bit validating. We had a week where between 4 of us on the team, we visited 9 different cities across Western Canada, including Whitehorse. That's a little bit crazy. But the conversations were really motivating, really eye-opening and really inspiring. So here is what we heard. First up, people are really thrilled that you'll go and visit them and listen to their points of view. It's sort of basic, but it's really important. Especially as we got outside of Ontario and Quebec, people were genuinely pumped that people from the federal government would take the time to visit them. For working level people in municipal and provincial governments, for technology companies, for people working for small companies and universities, it really meant a lot to them that we were there. It was kind of humbling since, for our team, we're pretty down to earth. But to go and to listen to people and to genuinely listen without, some kind of pre-canned thing that we were trying to get a stamp of approval for, it really meant a lot to people. And I'm sure for those of you who work for provincial or for municipal governments, getting outside of the capital or getting outside of the office and actually talking and interacting with people, people really appreciate the chance to share their views. And the other big thing is that the priorities and the perspectives that people shared in Atlantic Canada or in Western Canada were really different in a lot of ways than the ideas that people had in Ontario and Quebec. And especially as far as things go, like how to work with or how to work for the federal government, it feels a lot more distant and inaccessible when you're further outside of Ottawa. And so that's an important perspective that we would have missed if we had just sort of stayed closer to home. Some of the most interesting conversations that we had were with municipal and provincial governments who are all trying to tackle similar challenges in terms of how do you create modern digital services that provide a similar experience to what people expect from companies like Amazon or Facebook or Apple. Like Hillary said yesterday, how can we all become organizations that operate effectively in the digital age? For us, we definitely had a vested interest in this question because we were already working on planning what would become the Canadian Digital Service Team. And so being able to learn from provincial digital teams, especially in Ontario, Nova Scotia, BC, and Saskatchewan, as well as municipalities like Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal, these teams have really led the way, and to be able to learn from how they structure their teams and their ways of working was really fascinating. And one of those questions is, how do you structure a digital service team within the bigger ecosystem of IT organizations and a broader public service? Should they be standalone units? Should they be part of the traditional IT division, part of communications? Should they be part of a central agency or something like the mayor's office that's more central? So different provinces and cities have all tackled this differently. But the one common theme is having really dedicated and really focused leadership is really key in order to help overcome silos and organizational divisions and to champion the overall outcomes for citizens that use public services. So many of the really successful digital teams around the world trace it back to having really solid leadership that can both protect the team and also help promote broader culture change inside of organizations. So creating the space for really talented people to do good work is, really shape and change the status quo. That's really what it's all about. And so for us at CDS, a big part of our early policy work before we officially launched was all the underlying organizational elements to create as much room to maneuver and as much room to experiment as possible. And leadership support is really important for that. The other big organizational change was, this move towards working in the open or working out loud, like Hillary talked about yesterday. Traditionally, public servants and public institutions tend to be anonymous or faceless. And digital government teams in Canada and around the world have really seen this trend towards, being really public and sharing how they're working and what they're working on. That's something like Hillary mentioned yesterday that's inspired by the United Kingdom's government digital service. And they've had a blog since 2011 where they talk about all kinds of updates from their everyday work, everything from really strategic, high-level thinking, all the way down to really minute design changes. So like our checkboxes used to look like this, and now they look slightly different. All of that's really interesting and really helpful to other teams that are trying to follow in their lead. And here in Canada, the Ontario Digital Service, which Hillary leads, has really set the standard for working in the open. They have a Medium blog that you can find where they have all sorts of cool insights into their work, and they have these office hours meetups where members of the public can come and learn about what they do. And part of this is just about transparency just being good in general, especially for all of us here working on open government, but it's also about showing a commitment to learning and changing, and in a way to demonstrate as a digital team how you're learning from best practices around the world, and also to let others learn as much as possible from your work. It's really cool. Some of the feedback that we heard again and again from small IT vendors across Canada is, it's really, really hard to work for the federal government. C'est quelque chose qu'on a entendu d'un bout du pays à l'autre. C'est super difficile à travailler pour le gouvernement fédéral. Des procès de contrat ou de RFP qui sont super pesantes, des requirements qui sont vraiment complexes pour des projets d'informatique. C'est clair que la plupart du temps, les seules compagnies qui peuvent participer dans des projets ou des contrats fédéraux sont ceux qui ont déjà des équipes qui ont spécialisé en contrats fédéraux. C'est un peu un chicken and egg problem. Donc, what digital government teams in other countries have started doing is really rethinking how they look at IT procurement. In the UK, they run a digital marketplace program that makes it as easy as possible for small IT companies and specialists to connect with the departments that are looking to hire them. In the United States, 18F's micro-purchase system hires companies to build small pieces of larger open source projects, all as individual open source parts. It's a way of making it cheaper and lower risk to acquire software services, and it also broadens who can participate and levels the playing field between large and small companies. Here in Canada, we heard some neat stories from municipalities about how they're interacting with IT vendors. Vancouver's Chief Digital Officer, some of you might know Jesse Adcock, talked about how on their city team, they have a team of what they call digital quarterbacks that lead projects and then bring in small teams of freelancers or agencies, kind of like the rest of the football team, to scale up their digital capacity up and down when they need the help. The other big thing that we heard from governments across the country is moving towards this government as a platform model, where governments provide ways for technology companies to build systems and services that connect directly to government systems. The main example of this at the federal level is the Canada Revenue Agency's NetFile program, which lets you file your taxes through about 20 different companies from a whole bunch of 20 different pieces of software from a bunch of different companies that all can send and receive data from this area through a secure API. So imagine if that existed for more government services. Imagine if, for immigration services or new passport applications or other benefit programs like that, companies could compete to build the friendliest and the fastest interfaces to government services. I also feel like after listening to Kent and Tracy's presentation yesterday, there's a whole bunch of caveats around that whole field, which is really interesting, but there's a lot of unexplored potential there. Digital talent. This is what I hinted at earlier when I talked about my own sort of accidental career journey as a half technology, half public policy person. For governments to successfully modernize how we deliver services to the public, we need so many more technology people who understand how government works, and so many more public policy folks who understand technology. When I think back to my own grad school courses in public policy, we had all sorts of courses on political history, research methods, ethics, but nothing on technology or IT procurement or service design, even though we all enter the public sector workforce and suddenly end up interacting with IT systems all the time. There's a saying in the private sector world that every company is a software company. Some just don't know it yet. That's true in the public sector too. Everything that we do involves technology in some way, and we need people who thrive in the digital world that we live in. Talking to government counterparts across Canada and talking to tech companies, this is a challenge for everyone. There's a huge shortage of technology professionals. Software engineers, programmers, designers, and user researchers are in huge demand. And actually, the panel on open government yesterday talked about this too. We talked to companies in Regina, Saskatchewan, who hire second-year co-op students in computer science and often end up promising them a job 2 years before they graduate because they're that short of talent. Meanwhile, in government, we all have stories about how it took 6 months or a year or 2 or 3 before we heard back from a job application. We have a lot of complex requirements to hire people, especially in the computer systems fields at the federal level, where you have to have a degree in this, you have to have this many years of experience in that. And then meanwhile, there's companies like Shopify, which is a tech company in Ottawa, where they hire software developers right out of high school. The technology world has changed really quickly, and all of our HR and hiring processes were built for a different time. L'autre élément qu'on entend souvent, c'est que les gens ne s'intéressent plus dans des carrières de 20 ou 30 ans dans le gouvernement. Surtout dans le monde d'informatique, on bouge souvent pour trouver de nouvelles expériences ou surtout pour garder nos compétences au courant. Dans les États-Unis, leurs équipes numériques embauchent des gens surtout pour des tours of duty d'une année ou deux qui viennent de Silicon Valley, retournent à Washington et revenir toujours. Here in Canada, we're really lucky to have Code for Canada, which launched this summer, and that has a fellowship program that brings in really talented teams of fellows from the technology industry into government departments for one-year terms. It's a way of bringing in fresh ideas and ways of working. The one silver lining, as far as digital talent, is that people in the technology world are really interested in the mission and the potential of public service work. To be able to build things that impact people's everyday lives, that's a really meaningful opportunity. I think that's something that's really important for all of us as public servants to remember. We're here to serve the public, and there's something really profound about that. For technology professionals who spend their days building, slightly better e-commerce websites or advertising margins for an agency, to be able to build things that improve people's lives is really meaningful. That said, though, as a government operation, there's a huge amount of responsibility that comes with bringing people in from the private sector at the top of their careers. You need to provide an enabling environment that actually lets them work, with the tools and the tech and even the office space that lets them thrive. At CDS, we've made really intentional choices about how we work, and our offices aren't a traditional cubicle or even workplace 2.0 type space. They're just a bunch of tables with monitors on them, and we move around a lot. It's inspired by the co-working spaces and technology companies that we've seen that are built for people to collaborate and share ideas and interact all the time. When we're bringing in staff from Shopify or Google or some tech startup, we need to make sure that they're just as happy and productive working with us as they would be at the previous company. The last thing is, to be able to build genuinely better services for the people that we serve, we need to have diverse teams, both from multidisciplinary fields and also teams that reflect the diversity of people living here in Canada. It's hard for us to see our own blind spots when we're building digital services, especially if our teams are all made up of white male dudes. If you want to design services and systems that are inclusive, you really need to have a diverse team. And that's something that we're thinking about a lot at CDS, although we could definitely be a bit more systematic about it. As of this week or last week, we actually have a 50-50 gender split on our team, but as you can probably guess, it's not super evenly distributed between our policy and design teams and our software development teams. So I think we could definitely go a lot further there, and there's a lot that we could learn from tech companies that are working on this. Focusing on user needs, this is what it's actually all about at the end of the day. When it comes to designing and building digital government services, the most important questions to ask are, who is our user and what are their needs? Rather than saying, here's our business process, here's our workflow, now let's build a thing that does that. The biggest part of this is actually talking to the everyday people that use our services, doing user research to find out what people's needs are when they use a service, and building prototypes, like we talked about with the workshop this morning, and showing them to real people, getting feedback and data, and then quickly iterating and changing based on the feedback that people provide. That takes a lot of bravery and a lot of organizational culture change from how we normally build or procure systems in government. It involves investing in resources and talent to do user research and learning to build small and imperfect products that you actually then go out and test with people. To launch things in beta and say, this isn't perfect, but rather than waiting for 2 years to perfect it without actually talking to anyone, we'll launch it and we'll get feedback as we go. This is the norm in the technology industry, but it really challenges the culture of risk management and sign-off that we're used to in the public sector. The last big category that we talked about was the foundational pieces in the systems that we use to build and deploy digital services, about moving to cloud computing, using open source products, and dealing with legacy systems. Municipal and provincial governments are all dealing with these same challenges, and so it was really great to be able to hear about how they've been tackling all these questions. And this was definitely the area where there's the biggest divergence between the government counterparts that we met with and the tech companies that we talked to. For the federal government, cloud computing is something that people are just dipping their toe into. But in the private sector, using these services has been the norm for years. There's obviously a lot of policy aspects there that we have to figure out from privacy and from security angles, but using cloud services has been such a game changer for tech companies of any size that it's really important for governments to be able to figure out how to move in that direction. Another really key foundational piece is digital identity, which every provincial team that we talked to is thinking about as a priority. We didn't expect that coming in, but literally everyone at the provincial level said digital identity is one of our most important priorities. Making it easier for people to securely access securely access services from just logging in to proving their identity as a particular citizen, that's something that's really crucial as a foundation for building other government services. There's a lot of discussion on what a more integrated digital identity system would look like from provincial and federal levels together. And the basic goal of that is that citizens don't actually often make a distinction between one layer of government and another, whether it's municipal or provincial or federal. And so building systems that can actually reflect that is really useful. And the last piece is how to deal with legacy systems, which affect digital service deliveries at every level of government. These systems are expensive, often huge, and sometimes built using technologies or systems that have been out of date for decades. For digital transformation teams like ours or Ontario's or others, it brings up a whole bunch of questions. Do you just try to build a better interface that connects to an old system? Do you try to replace pieces of a legacy system, sort of bit by bit? It's usually impossible to actually throw it out and replace it from scratch after the system has spent 10 or 20 years sort of like an amoeba extending itself to become an essential part of every single part of an organization. So what we heard as the most useful comparison model is that large banks and financial institutions actually deal with the same challenge every day, where they also have boatloads of legacy systems, but you can log into your bank, for most banks, and you'll get a pretty nice interface, even if each little box on that screen is actually connected to some distant mainframe far away around the world. And so there's a lot that we can learn there from how other large institutions tackle legacy systems. Beyond the insights that we learned from everyone that we spoke to, one of the biggest takeaways from the engagement tour was just meeting and becoming connected with so many cool people across Canada working on this. It's really an exciting time to be working on digital government in Canada. There's amazing work being done at the municipal and provincial levels, and there's brilliant talent, although in short supply, across Canada's technology industry. And meeting so many of the people that are working on this, both in and out of government, was really exciting and really inspiring. For digital government to really work, it's really about federal and provincial and municipal governments all working together and being able to meet face-to-face with counterparts at different levels of government and to learn about how we can collaborate was really exciting. One thing that's actually useful to note, sort of as a side thing, is that the Nova Scotia digital team started a discussion channel on Slack, and as we went across the country, we invited everyone that we met with from municipal and provincial governments to join it. So some of you might know Beth Fox or Natasha Clark from the Nova Scotia team. They're doing awesome work. And so that Slack community is a way for those of us who are working on this to all keep in touch. So if you're interested, you can come find me later for an invite. It's great. So that's what we learned in a very brief nutshell. So getting outside of our Ottawa government bubble, learning about better ways of working, better ways of co-creating, and about digital talent, focusing on the user, and then learning how to deal with foundational systems like legacy infrastructure. All of this helped inform the launch of the Canadian Digital Service, which was announced in the 2017 federal budget and officially launched in July. So you can read our full report there on the URLs on the side. And if you have any thoughts or feedback, you can leave a comment at the bottom, which is kind of nice. We're really grateful to have been able to learn from so many people along this journey, from digital government teams around the world, and from municipal and provincial governments here in Canada that are doing really fascinating work. And to be able to learn from tech startups and incubators, universities, and traditional IT companies that are all really interested in what the future of digital government and digital public service delivery looks like. So just to wrap up, I'll give a quick overview of the Canadian Digital Service. We're very new, and over the past few months, it's been really interesting to shift from more of the policy and planning work that we did at the start into the world of designing and delivering digital services. For our team, we've got a 3-year mandate to experiment and try new things and to explore the art of the possible, sort of like Hillary talked about, with modern digital government services. Our goal is to make government services more easy to use by bringing together user-centric design, user research, agile and iterative software development, and cutting-edge technology and tools and platforms to build things that measure up with what our private sector peers are building. We've got 3 overall areas to our mandate. The first is partnering with federal departments on digital service projects. So that's helping to build new or redesigned online services, making it easier for people to interact with departments and to receive the services that they need. Our second stream is digital capacity building, which is work to help increase the digital literacy and skill sets of public servants working across the federal government, from IT professionals to senior management and beyond. We're just getting started on that, and we're working with the Canada School of Public Service to help make that happen. Lastly, we also provide advice on technology investments or service design in conjunction with our colleagues in other parts of the Federal Treasury Board and across the government. For our project delivery, we're in a little bit of a lucky position where we can choose the projects that we work on. We want to have as much impact as possible, but we're still a really small team compared to the scale of the entire federal government. When we get project requests from departments, this is our criteria for how we choose which projects to partner on. So how much impact or reach a project will have in terms of being able to positively affect people's lives, how reusable or replicable whatever we build will be across the federal public service, and we'd rather build something that solves a problem or a pain point that a lot of departments or program teams are affected by, rather than a one-off solution that's a bit more niche for one team. And finally, we want to make sure that the departments that we partner with are ready and comfortable with the ways that we work, and to have the support that they need internally, from comms to IT to senior management on their end, to be successful. As we work, we're committed to working in the open, and we have a blog where we talk about the work that we're doing and what we're thinking about, inspired by the Ontario and United Kingdom's digital teams. We start with user research as the first step of any delivery project, and all of our projects are open source so that others can provide feedback on or learn from or reuse the things that we built. What's really neat is that departments are really excited to work with us, and since we launched, it's been really neat to learn from and meet all the different sort of pockets of awesomeness from across the federal government that have been working for a long time to try to build things in a new and modern way. We're really excited to champion and to celebrate the work that other people are doing, and to help empower and enable anyone who's trying to make positive change happen. And we're hiring, nous embauchons, just to shamelessly plug that. Si vous connaissez des gens qui travaillent comme designers, comme programmeurs, en data science, product management ou engagement et communication, envoyez-le à nous. C'est ça aussi, c'est pas nécessaire ou c'est pas obligatoire, mais si vous savez comment traduire full stack software engineer en français, ce sera encore mieux. C'est super utile. So we're hiring on a rolling basis, and there's no deadline, but the sooner people apply, the sooner that they could become part of shaping the early journey of CDS and where we go next. So just like our report is only the beginning, this is only the beginning of our journey. And we're really excited to keep learning, and to keep learning from people that are doing great work across the country, from all of you, and to share what we learn along the way. The future's bright. Thanks so much. Sure, yeah. Je pense on a quelques minutes pour questions, donc si vous l'avez.
Anyone has a question?
Any questions?
Richard?
Go for it.
I'd like for you to expand a little bit more on the readiness angle of departments that you go out and help. And you shared an interesting story with me the other day that I think you probably should share as well. And the example of the teams that your team does not help, right? Because there are some elements that are required before you say yes.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So the question was how we choose who to partner with and how we sort of assess the readiness of other departments to work with them. And essentially, the big difference between how our team works and how IT is traditionally done in government is around, being open, using open source, and being agile rather than a traditional waterfall approach to building software. And so the big question is, if we build something like that, how comfortable is our partner department with those same processes? How comfortable are they with working in the open? And one of the interesting things about the requests that we get from business teams that deliver particular services is sometimes I think we've ended up as sort of like the last resort people to call after they have an idea for a cool new project, but their internal IT team said no, their internal comms team said no, their senior management also said no, and then they say, hey, CDS, can you actually build this thing for us? And for us, it's a bit of a, as much as we really like that sort of like gumption, part of the challenge is that our mandate is to build a system and then hand it back to the department to keep on operating it. And so if they're not ready on their side to take that and run with it, if we're going to build something and then their local IT team is going to say, no, we actually can't run this, then they might not be the best people to partner with. In those situations, we're still trying to find a way to at least provide advice and guidance so we can help sort of move them to the next step of whatever they're working on. But the departments that we're partnering with right now are the ones that are actually also really excited to work in the open, to blog about our work, and are comfortable with us building things open source and publishing them right away. So it's a really good question for sure. Part of it is that the sort of longer goal, like Hillary talked about, of culture change in departments. And so you start by finding the champions that are really excited to work in the same ways and run with them, and hopefully that can lead and work as an example for other people that are, also moving along that journey a little bit more slowly. Question? Sorry, Natalie, go for it. Oh.
There you go, Natalie. Thank you. Okay. Hi, Sean. Thanks so much for that. That was awesome.
Sure, thanks.
I just wanted to ask you a question about the goal around simplicity and making services simple. Just because we had done some work in the SDC lab around transitioning people into online services, and one of the things we found, which was a bit of an aha for us, was that when citizens interact with online services, we actually found that it requires more knowledge on the part of the citizen who's in a self-serving environment often than historically it has when they go and they have a human that helps them through the system.
Kind of like intermediate.
And so what we might think is actually a simpler transaction can require more knowledge on the part of the citizen. I'm just wondering how that factors into the way you simplify things.
Yeah, that's a really great point, actually. I think that's easy to forget that sort of, for people who have grown up as digital natives, there's sort of this assumption that online must automatically be easier, but that's not the case for a lot of people. There's a poster that I have above my desk from the Australia Digital Transformation Team, and it says, do the hard work to make it simple. Because oftentimes when we're building something, we just sort of replicate our internal processes on a website, which makes sense to a public servant, but doesn't necessarily make sense to the public. So I think that's a great point, that figuring out how to really simplify things and to make it something that people are comfortable with in an environment where it's just them and there's sort of no human being around to help guide them through it is really important. So that's a great point for sure. Nice. Time for... Oh. Feel free to chat with me afterwards. I'll be around, and you can always tweet me questions.
One thing on that point, though, is that there isn't a human being around because it's being tested in Canada, even though it's digital.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. Thanks very much. Nice.
Thanks, Sean, for raising the awareness about the Canadian Digital Service. I guess I could find out the fact that you worked in Ghana in terms of engagement and all these aspects. I could see that behind it. And I was thinking about my son, who is at Statistics Canada, trying to prove to his superior that they should open a Reddit and having AMAs once in a while. The communication box is controlling the message all the time. So I could really relate it to that also. So as you've seen, Sean accepted my challenge to do part of his presentation in French, so you should give him a round of applause for that. And he's one of my new best friends. So we hope that you will all come back to New Brunswick, Sean, again soon. And please stay in touch with all our fellow Govmakers. Now, just a couple of housekeeping items. I am going to give it the gift. Yeah. Yes. I should give the gift first. Sorry. I'm starting. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, thanks. Merci pour l'encouragement.
I guess that's because the computer was in front of me and I was just, Okay, so a couple of housekeeping items before. We'll take your computer off, yeah. Geez, it's getting at the end of the day, huh? During the last break at 2:30, we will be distributing evaluation forms, and we would greatly appreciate hearing from you about what you liked from Govmaker and what we can improve. And please return any headphones at the table in the back over there. I understand there's still 2 missing, so might just look at your pocket or they dropped under the floor, or on the floor, sorry. And now my co-chair, Cheryl Henson, will present on something we all have been eagerly awaiting, New Brunswick digital transformation. Cheryl?
Okay. Yep. Thank you. So I'm here to prove that not only cool white dudes like Sean talk about digital transformation. But trust me, my kids would not even use the word cool if related to me. But I was driving into the city the other night thinking about our conversation here today, and I had my 20-year-old with me, and it was dark, and I looked over at her and I said, okay, like just give me a little bit of leeway. I said, I'm going to give you a statement, and I want you to tell me the first thing that pops into your head. So she's there, it's in the dark, so I can't really see her, but trust me, I can feel the rolling of the eyes. And it kind of like, she goes, oh, right, Mom, right? So I said, working for government. And I can tell you, it wasn't even a nanosecond. I'm sure it wasn't even a heartbeat. I know she didn't think. I know she didn't even blink. But she kind of exhaled and went, no way, right? And I look at her and I said, well, maybe you want to think about that now just for a minute. But, we had a really good discussion. It's about a 25-minute drive. And that followed. And afterwards, she used words like this: disconnected, archaic, maybe ancient, out of touch. And I thought, wow, it was a really good touch point. But I've got to tell you that I've heard some of those same words over the last 8 months in the journey that I've been on with my team. So in January 2017, we were challenged to create a strategy for the creation of a digital New Brunswick. And I work in an incredible team, a lot of them are here today, with different skill sets, different competencies, different backgrounds. But I got to tell you, we were really pumped. And one of the things was we were not allowed to bring in consultants to write the strategy for us. They said, do it yourself and do it with the people. Sometimes it's a challenge because, as a bureaucrat, the first thing you kind of do is you hire a consulting company and come in and say, hey, write me a digital strategy, and you tell them what to write, and then you get it back and you say, we have a digital strategy. But we wanted to take it the other way. So I wish I could go into details. I kind of want to say a little bit ditto to Sean because you're going to see similar themes. But instead of doing that, I want to just talk about 4 really themes that resonate throughout our strategy. And plus, Lorna has only given me like 7.5 minutes, and she's got a hook. She's going to pull me off of the stage. The first theme, absolutely, and we've heard it over the last couple days, is that, hey, it's about the citizen. And you can use whatever word you want to use. We could say patient, we could say client, we could say consumer, we could say resident, we could say business, but it is about the citizen. I've been a bureaucrat for 30-some years. I'm a very proud bureaucrat, and I'm looking at you, Richard, because I'm thinking of the pig this morning, but I'm not holding it against you. But I work with an amazing group of bureaucrats. But what I've noticed somewhere is that our language has changed. And we will say that we provide public services to citizens or to businesses. And what our strategy is suggesting is that we've got to throw that out. And our language has to be that we provide services with citizens and with businesses, right? If we want to remain relevant and we want to provide the exceptional services now and into the future, it has to be with citizens and with business. Our digital strategy is built on this. In fact, the two main objectives are the citizen-centric and business-centric delivery of public services using the wonderful digital technologies, as well as to support citizens in accessing their own information and services anywhere, anyplace, anytime, using whatever device they so choose. So our strategy is built around that. Our strategy speaks to things that we've been hearing over the last day and a half, such as digital literacy, leaving no one behind. How can we reimagine programs and services with citizens at the table? And I know for some that don't work in government, it may not sound that revolutionary. It is revolutionary for government to think of a different way of planning and delivering services. So we are adopting the lens of the citizen throughout the strategy. I started my career out in healthcare. And in the early 80s, one of the books that I read that really struck me, that stayed with me all throughout my career, was Through the Lens of the Patient, and how the healthcare system is absolutely not about patients. It was more about service providers. So, you know, we're bringing that back strongly with our strategy. It's about culture. We have that theme all the way through. We've heard a lot about culture today. Over 6 months of listening to a lot of frustrated or pent-up people, and I've got to say it's very humbling to listen to 500 civil servants who are very passionate say they want to think different, and they want to act different, and they want to do different, and they want to do better. And to hear that over and over again, it was incredible. And I can tell you at the end of the day with our workshops, you know, they would say to us, when we're facilitating the sessions, they would say, you know, just get going, get moving, get started. So what we have to ensure is that culture will not eat strategy for breakfast, because we know that happens. Even the UK saw that a little bit, you know. When they started in 2014, they had change in leadership. All of a sudden, the bureaucracy rose up and started to eat the strategy. So we have ingredients in our strategy speaking to leadership, speaking to governance, speaking to education, speaking to empowerment, things to ensure that we have the culture that we need to be successful. It's about collaboration. We've heard a lot about that. You know, we laid out the battle plan for, okay, how are we going to get this strategy in place? We knew right from the beginning that we wanted to model what we were going to be saying in our strategy. So we started the transformation journey with our very first workshop. And we listened to stories, and we listened to wisdom, and we listened to guidance, and we listened to people tell us what not to do, what to do. We listened to over 7,000 citizens, 500 civil servants. We talked to the private sector companies in the province. We talked to the tech companies. We talked to elementary school kids, middle school, high school, community colleges, the universities. If people were willing to talk with us, we listened. So we called it our listening journey. And I can tell you, it's very easy to write a strategy after you've been out there and you've heard. And it was very easy to write what should be happening, because we heard a lot. And what we know is that the public sector, we cannot do it alone. Government cannot do it alone. We need to build an ecosystem for support and change with all the stakeholders at the table. It's absolutely essential. I envision an army of transformationists. And I like what Hillary had yesterday when she said to go from 60 to 60,000, that's what we need, right? We don't just need a small cluster, we need to create change. And together, we can do it. Lastly, I think a key theme in our strategy is comprehensive. Over and over and over again, we heard, Cheryl, it's not about technology. Don't make it about technology. And people are always suggesting names. Don't call it transformation. Don't call it digital. Don't call it this. But make sure it's not about the technology. And we listened. So we have a transformation strategy for digital New Brunswick that speaks to 7 strategic areas. Success through leadership. Leadership from top down, bottom up, outside in, inside out. People powered. How do we empower our citizens? How do we empower our staff for the change? How do we reimagine services and programs? We've heard a lot about that. How do we modernize our technology to get where we need to go? How do we get rid of, we're so saddled with legacy systems in order to free us into the new world? How do we do business innovation? How do we use information? How do we change data to information, to knowledge, to wisdom? How do we wrap all of the above with privacy and security to safeguard our journey? And how do we manage risk? Risk is a big one. I work in a government. Risk, governments tend to be risk averse. How do we say it's okay? We can go forward. We can manage some of the risk. So what we did is we connected all the dots. And we felt the only way to really move the needle into transformation of public services was to do it holistically. So it's a very aggressive strategy, but I think it's the right one. And at the end of the day, I keep hearing the people that we listened to in the workshops say, get going, get going, get going. So we feel our strategy is a call. It's a very bold call for people to join us, to plan, to create, to participate, to innovate in a better tomorrow in terms of the delivery of government services. And personally, I hope in the very near future, and I don't mean years, I mean months, when I look over at my 20-year-old daughter and say, hey, what do you think about working for government? She's going to look at me, she's going to say, when do I start? Which will be wonderful. So that is our strategy in terms of themes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to invite some panelists for their perspective around what this transformation means. And so I'm going to invite up to the stage, I'm really excited about this. From the private sector, we have Kathy Simpson, who is Vice President, T4G, People and Culture, and founder of Up and Go, which is just an incredible organization. And then we have Nick Scott somewhere. There he is. Well known to you as Executive Director of Open Government and Innovation. And from my co-chair, from the municipal perspective, the mayor of the city of Edmundston, His Worship Cyril Simard. So we're going to get these guys mic'd. And you guys have got all your mics?
Nope.
And I have some good questions, but before we go into the questions, what we want to do is I'm just going to invite each of you, I think, to give us, a 5-minute opinion piece around the subject of the transformation, digital transformation, innovation, from each of your own perspectives. So, Kathy, I think I'll start with you. Is that okay?
Sounds good. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I am responsible for our public sector practice. We are a national consulting company that does lots of great work in design, building solutions, and data. And I'm also responsible for our people and culture for the organization, which is an interesting combination, but it's very enjoyable. When I think about government, I think, oh, it's government. I think, how am I going to work with government? I think fixed mindset. I think they think this is the way it's always going to be. And what I've learned is that's all bullshit. That's not true. I've seen amazing civil servants. I've had the pleasure of working with Cheryl on a number of things for the past couple of years, and I don't see any of that. When I think about digital government, I think about what are the human and the technology building blocks that need to be put in place to make change happen. And for a long time, I would have underestimated the impact of culture, the impact of policy, the impact of regulation, the impact of, do politicians understand technology? Do some of the deputy ministers and the assistant deputy ministers understand technology? It's not easy. We underestimate the amount of effort it takes for people to understand the technology transformation is all about people and process. So when I think of the strategy that Cheryl's put out there, I think a lot more about, are the leaders ready to fail? Do they have a growth mindset? Are they thinking about, if we fail at this, what does tomorrow look like? We're going to take another stab at it in a different way. I pick myself up, I dust myself off, and I think that's okay. We're going to try a different approach. The other characteristic that I think is incredibly important at this phase in transformation is vulnerability. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, why is she talking about vulnerability? For us to be confident in the work that we do when we're trying to engage with citizens, we have to be open to vulnerability. We have to be open to say, I want to listen. I don't want to have my plan all figured out, and then I present it at some focus group, and then some citizens say, well, that's not really what I had in mind, and the team go, well, crap, we've done all this work. Instead, I think we need to have this realization that by being vulnerable and by being open to engagement way early on in the process, you're going to have a much better result. So yes, while I've worked in technology for 27 years and I work in a technology consulting company, my biggest learning about the journey that New Brunswick is on is all about having a growth mindset. And it's all about being able to make change happen because it's okay to fail and try something new. And it's okay to expose yourself and be vulnerable for anything that's going to happen.
All right. We can go in this order?
Yeah.
Sounds good. So when I think about the digital transformation, I think about the Tom Loosemore quote that Hillary put up yesterday, which is something to the effect of, digital is about applying the tools, processes, culture, et cetera, of the internet era to our work today, right? And I get excited about the digital transformation for a couple of things. One is, a couple of reasons. I think one is, counterintuitively perhaps, through the digital transformation, we have an opportunity to make government more human than our traditional bureaucracy has ever allowed it to be. And by that, I mean more human-centered, right? Improving that relationship between government and citizens through those approaches that Hillary and others have shared throughout this conference about putting the citizen needs at the center of our work, about co-creation, applying design approaches to our work. We have an opportunity to get closer to the citizens and thereby building trust that we were unable to have when the walls of government were so thick and so high and so siloed within and so wrought with paperwork and forms and this kind of sort of who wants to deal with government in the traditional sense. But what I've seen is glimpses of the future through the last 4 years of being on this conference, that we can actually change our behaviors in a way that are more human And I think that's counterintuitive. When we think about digital, we tend to think about robots and that kind of thing. But I think that this is a unique opportunity. And it's a unique opportunity to change the patterns of our work inside government. So rather than being siloed, rather than being relatively individualistic in our approaches to work, not really connecting well across disciplines or with citizens, we can start bringing teamwork back into the picture, and we can start changing our behavior in ways that that hasn't been possible in the sort of strict siloed hierarchy of yesteryear or yestercentury. So I'm really excited about that, and how applying these new patterns and printing them on government will allow us to actually deal with some of those complex challenges, those inequalities and inequities in our society that have actually held us back from advancing technologically speaking, socially speaking, and culturally speaking. And we can be an enabling society through that. So that's what I'm most excited about, and I'm looking forward to being part of the journey with Cheryl and my colleagues in government in sort of really redesigning this very ancient institution.
Merci. Alors, moi, j'occupe un siège très stratégique parce que je suis dans un gouvernement local. Je suis en contact réel sur une base quotidienne avec les gens et on reçoit beaucoup de demandes, beaucoup de choses qui ne sont pas automatiquement de l'ordre de la municipalité. Maintenant, je dis que c'est un siège stratégique parce qu'on est capable de bouger plus rapidement. On a beaucoup moins de contraintes pour mettre en œuvre des politiques. Et on peut même faire ce que j'ai fait l'année passée, c'est-à-dire annoncer ici que le conseil municipal va bientôt être disponible sur Facebook Live, alors que quand j'arrive à la maison, les spécialistes de la municipalité me disent « Did you really say that? » I said « Yes. We'll be on Facebook Live. » And I don't do it in an autocratic way. I just said, we should do this. Coming from a business perspective, being an entrepreneur, being able to show and build trust within the organization where we can change our mindset, doing things differently, and getting inspired by what we could do in the business and private sector helps me a lot in proving and just showing why should we do this. Also being technology savvy also helps me explaining how we can do it somehow, a little bit. Maybe not in the specificity, but just generally speaking. Et donc, c'est un siège confortable. Et moi, je suis content de la stratégie parce que ça fait longtemps que je dis qu'il faut qu'on fasse ça au Nouveau-Brunswick parce qu'on est dans une province extraordinairement configurée pour avoir du succès de par la nature urbaine, rurale, francophone, anglophone. Il y a beaucoup Et on est une petite province, tout petite, de 700 000 habitants. C'est la grandeur de Hamilton, c'est la grandeur de Québec. Et donc, il n'y a aucune raison pour laquelle on ne devrait pas avoir du succès de devenir les premiers dans ce monde. Ce que je souhaite, par exemple, c'est que quand on va être les premiers dans le monde, parce qu'on est souvent les premiers dans le monde à faire des choses au Nouveau-Brunswick, qu'on continue de garder ça comme étant un focus. Parce que souvent, on va flavor of the month, we do something, it's good, we have a plan, we have a few success, and after that, we go and we change onto something else. So as a province, we should do, focus at least for 10 years on this, not only 4 years. And I understand that politics has a lot to do with it, but the good thing with this is that it's citizens-oriented, and citizens will be part of it. So they will pressure, I guess, the politicians at all the levels to deliver.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to pick up on the vulnerability statement, and because I think it's interesting. And I guess my question to any one of you or all of you would be, can the public sector embrace the trial and learn approach that we've been hearing so much about? Will the public accept it? Will they support that type of an approach?
I think in your shoes, there's so much criticism so quickly when you do fail. A lot of what we talk about in design thinking is getting MVPs out there. So how do we do more of that? And how do we get it so that you're supported if things do go sideways? It can't be that team did it too fast and, man, Cheryl, find someone new on that team. They're not making the cut, you know. But you have to have leadership that appreciates that. And then I think citizens need to see that you are really trying to do things differently. I mean, Govmaker, how many years, Nick? 4. So this is the 4th year. And I'm sure Govmaker year 1, a bunch of the audience were here going, I'm here because Nick asks me to come. And I'm not quite sure what kind of transformation he's got his mind around as he's thinking about social policy and change.
It was pretty fuzzy.
It was pretty fuzzy.
Yeah.
And now you're right in government, so the accountability is right there on your back.
It was a 4-year interview, basically.
Yes, that's right. So we have to be engaging citizens early and often, and stakeholders early or often, or the forgiveness is just not going to be where you need it to be. And I think you need to have a lot of Teflon. You have to have a lot of armor and people who can handle that and show that you can lead by example, Cheryl.
I want to pick up on that. I mean, absolutely include citizens early. And I think, so one of the things that we talk a lot about is risk, and we need to be less risk averse and all of this stuff. And one time I was talking to my colleague from Mars, Jerry Coe, and we were having this conversation, and he said, you know, it's not about how much risk you take, it's how you take risk that matters. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, when we talk about risk, we talk about, you know, there's no bad failure if you learn from it. The trick is, how do you learn small and in small iterations and move fast through the learning and through those rapid cycles, you know, starting with something as simple as the tabletop prototype that happened in this room today with citizens, and taking risks that way, so that by the time you're testing your pilot in the field at a lot larger scale, it's more about testing how do you scale this program rather than is it a good idea and will it work. And then, so I think we need to find spaces within government and between government and outside world to do this kind of work, this kind of rapid iteration and testing and learning, and recognize that there are different kinds of risks that we're talking about, and not to maybe jump to the field and test your idea on such a large scale. Yeah, I think that's really important. I think the other part of that, of bringing citizens in early. And this is something that I've been thinking about in terms of the Rogers innovation curve, you know, the pattern in which technology diffuses through society. Culture changes in a similar pattern, right? And so the folks who came to Govmaker 1 were tolerant of my fuzzy, our, you know, it wasn't just mine, but the New Brunswick Social Policy Research Network's sort of fuzzy ideas of what open government is and what innovation is. But those are the folks you learn from. Those are the folks who want to be part of that innovation story, that change story. So that by the time you start testing through piloting in the field and in the world, you've got a bunch of folks who have been part of that process, who are citizens. They're not government. They're not biased. They see where this is going, and it's in a place where it's more likely to succeed than if we tried to test an idea in this fashion. So it's, you know, we also talk about, is it fast companies or fast movements? And you get fast movements through this approach, I think.
The other thing, Cheryl, too, is you need to think about how are you measuring success. Mm-hmm. And in the past, it's, you know, pretty cut and dry, but is measuring success getting more out there, getting more feedback, and fast failing and changing? You know, when I think about digital strategy for the province, it's not just how do we get more services online, obviously. You talked about all of those and you presented that. When I think about some of the organizations in the province, like MBIF, we're investing in startup ideas, we're investing in researchers, because we think that they can create a business or a business concept that we can germinate here in New Brunswick. And we're now measured based on how successful they are. So we're changing some of those measures to say we're investing earlier because we think that there's better ideas if we get at it early enough, and that means we're going to fail more. And more of those companies aren't going to make it. And it takes some confidence to say, I'm okay with that. And those are going to be the new measures. So that's part of what you've got to think about when you're measuring your success.
Ce que j'apprécie dans ces commentaires-là, c'est de faire la démonstration que quand on amène des équipes à réfléchir au fait qu'ils peuvent avoir des échecs, c'est aussi une façon de les empower, c'est-à-dire de leur donner la responsabilité, de dire on croit dans vous autres, on croit dans les gens qui sont capables de mettre ça en place parce qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui cherchent ça comme facteur de motivation. Et évidemment, ils voient d'un côté la possibilité des échecs, mais de savoir qu'ils peuvent prendre des chances. Et ça ne veut pas dire qu'on va improviser. Au contraire, il y a quand même des éléments de base qu'on peut mettre en place. Mais à la fin de la journée, de dire on est capable de faire des choses et qu'on a confiance dans vos capacités, dans vos skills pour gérer le changement, pour amener des nouvelles idées et même récupérer quand ça dérape. Et à la fin de la journée, dans le monde municipal en tout cas, vu qu'un maire, c'est beaucoup un cheerleader, ben, je dis toujours, moi, écoutez, à la fin de ça, quand il va y avoir quelque chose, il y a deux choses. Première chose, si on fait un échec, ça va durer 2 ou 3 jours, puis après ça, les gens vont passer à autre chose. Mais surtout, je vais essayer de faire récupérer, moi, le message pour faire en sorte que dans la vie, partout, on en a des échecs. Donc, c'est normal qu'on en ait dans une administration, qu'elle soit gouvernementale. C'est une question de changement de culture, effectivement, je pense qu'il faut réfléchir.
Okay, go ahead, Nick. Yeah? No, go ahead.
No. I think, well, I was just thinking about what you're saying, and one of the things that I think Hillary had said is, you know, we build trust when we deliver together, right? And so, you know, back to that sort of idea that we can actually be more, government can become more human through the digital transformation. We start building these kinds of relationships collaboratively with citizens in the design and delivery of, you know, policies, programs, and services. We start to build trust and rekindle trust in government again. And I think that is like one of the big things that gets me out of bed in the morning is this opportunity that we can turn the tide on this growing cynicism and distrust in government by working together with citizens collaboratively. And as Alex Ryan says, you know, you change culture not through a culture change initiative, but through collaborative project work. And yeah, I have a whole bunch of other things I want to say.
So I'm going to pick up a little bit on that. So what we know is, let's say, private sector companies that have embraced digital transformation, research shows they're successful quicker, faster, longer. You know, companies are trying to embrace it. What we also know is that politicians do listen to the voters, right? When the voters are unhappy, they all express their levels of unhappiness with different ways. They want change. One of the things I know, and from speaking to the other jurisdictions as well, and even speaking internally, is when we say, we need a digital transformation. And when you go to government, you know, the elected officials are looking at us and saying, okay, which citizens are wanting that, right? Because we don't have a march on the legislature saying, make government digital. Right? I expect faster, better, easier. So how do we, I have said that before and I've gotten into trouble with it with our elected officials, is my measure of success will be when citizens demand better, faster, easier. But there isn't that level of demand yet. So what do we do with that?
Do politicians listen to voters? That's a good question. No, what I mean by that is that they listen to some voters. And one of the things that I found out, and I mean discussing with provincial elected officials also, is that they generally come in the politics arena with a specific agenda or a specific group of interests that they want to answer to, and when they get inside, if they don't have any experience with the government, they learn what it means public good and general interest, and those concepts they learn on the job. And at one point they start to I mean, just loosen up a little bit and they understand that actually their job is to make sure that they address those needs and not this specific needs of this particular group or individual that needs this specific, really specific service. Now, one of the things that I found out also is that there's a gap or a lack of trust from the elected officials for whatever reason on the civil servants, yeah, the bureaucrats. And again, after a while, they understand how professional they are, how dedicated they are. Most of them, obviously. So, and so they should listen to a broader perspective to be able to understand that it's something that really addresses, because the term needs is probably one of the most difficult terms to define, but there are some needs to move forward in this direction in terms of economy and stuff like that. They're not always apt to do it, but they have to focus on the general need of the population.
I think of one thing. I think of the power of storytelling, and I think the government needs to be storytellers, and they need to be telling the work that they're doing in a way that citizens understand, and they have to tell them in the areas that they're in social media, in town halls, whatever it is. But you don't tend to do that. You're humble. Things kind of run tickety-boo and as they're supposed to run, instead of trying to put out there, these are the changes that we're making to deliver more services. And it has to be in the form of new storytelling, not slick marketing, but new storytelling, because that's how citizens respond. They want to be able to see it, and you need to be able to say it. So I can't say there are a lot of governments who are really good at saying, I need a marketing strategy so that I can get more engaged and people understanding why this is so important.
I would just add something. I mean, on a regular basis, I talk with counselors explaining my views, and I always tell them that you're listening to a bunch of people at Tim Hortons, but the silent majority is reasonable people, and you have to prove them and explain and do this this marketing strategy in order for this group of individuals who are just in the middle of the curves to tilt on this way instead of going the other way. And this is the way to survive as a politician, even at the municipal level. Just you don't go on. You go on Facebook, you read the comments. Some are bad, but most of the majority, they're not there. This is not a perfect reflection of reality.
Tim Hortons drinkers are unreasonable.
McDonald's are better?
Because they block that right turning lane.
I know, drives you crazy.
Street,
drives you crazy.
To get into the drive-through, man. So, I'm reminded of Clay Christensen's theory of the job theory. What job do citizens want to get done? So they're not going to really be talking about digital or how do we please deliver this service in a digital way. And in fact, some may not want to deal with a computer or a piece of, hardware technology or software technology. They may want to deal with a human being face-to-face, and I think that's fine, but I think that human being face-to-face should be enabled or could be enabled by that same technology. But rather than think about how do we make all of our existing services and products, et cetera, digital, start to think about what is the job that our citizens are trying to get done, what is the problem that they're trying to solve, working with them to understand that, and then through the processes that make digital successful, understand how we're going to deliver on that. So don't start with the technology or lead with the app, right? But do that user-centered, empathetic research and go through that discovery phase, go through that testing and experimental phase, and maybe we'll find, there's another solution that we just hadn't thought of yet. If you ask them, they're going to tell you they want a faster horse or more cup holders, right? But what really they want to do is get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So a hyperloop's a good idea.
Yeah. So my last question, I think, and I'm looking out here, and I see, I see bureaucrats, I see private sector, I see not-for-profit, but we're all citizens. So I guess my question would be, what would you recommend? What is one small change that we could all do or make or act on that would help us with this journey, with this transformation? Like, what is something that is right there that you say, if we go out and if we can turn this moment into a movement, right?
Each of us bring 5 individuals to this conference next year. That's, I mean, that's simple, but bringing more people from all over the province and a more diverse a group of people, just each of us should bring 5 other people as a plea.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that should have been mine. Jeez. I don't have an answer yet.
What I would say is we're bombarded with information which creates what you have in your brain of the kind of data that you follow. So my Twitter feed follows a certain amount of data. And I get overwhelmed with sometimes this single thought. So I think since I'm reading so much about girls' leadership, everyone else is. But that's not the truth. So I have 4 simple steps that I follow when I'm trying to get my 10-year-old to be able to get her lunch made, to, trying to make transformational change happen in my job. And they're so simple. One is awareness. So people aren't aware. So what do you need to do to create the awareness? Well, that's usually talking about a problem or an opportunity. The second piece is once people are aware, you need to educate. So awareness and education. And when you get that started, more people, whether they be citizens or bureaucrats, Cheryl, they're starting to get more data and more information to understand. The second part of the equation is inspiration and action. So they need to see that there is something there that is going to drive them to say, when I come to work tomorrow, I want to go to that design thinking workshop because I have a feeling it's a better approach. But something has to inspire them to make that change. And I think storytelling does that, and leadership does that. So awareness, my 10-year-old needs to know Mommy can't get her lunch made every day for her. Education, here's healthy eating. These are the things that you can pick for your lunches. No, you can't have a bag of chips every day for your lunch. Inspiration, when we get out the door faster, she gets to play in the schoolyard for 5 minutes before she goes inside. And action, she gets herself to the back door. Like, to me, I can break down problem solving in some steps that I think it's not so overwhelming. You're not trying to change the whole system. You're trying to change something that you can get your hands around. And making it simple, I think, is how you break down some of that.
That was a really good parenting advice for me because I cannot get my 10-year-old out of the house in the mornings. And so I thought of my one small thing. How many of you are public servants? Raise your hands. How many of you are, no, keep them up, keep them up. How many of you are active on Twitter? So this is my one small thing. Because when you're in the thick of it, and I just started inside government, I've been working with government for a while, you can drown in it. And you can feel like when I'm chained to my desk for a while, I can start to not have really good ideas, not have real good thought patterns. I think that it's really helpful if you're connected and networked with folks who are outside of your immediate environment. And Twitter's not blocked by the firewall. You don't need to get approval to travel to use it. Start to find some hashtags, GC leaders, GC digital, OpenGov. These are, I can't tell you how serendipitous Twitter has allowed me to find new people, new ideas, new information, new resources that we apply regularly in New Lab. We're constantly pulling stuff from Twitter and throwing it onto Slack and then applying it in our workshops. So I would say that would be the one small thing you should do. start getting active and start seeking out those new ideas, new perspectives, and really start working in that internet era way. And I think that's the one thing.
Awesome. All excellent. I want to thank the panel. And the panel, I just threw the questions at them. They didn't, as you can see, this wasn't scripted. So I really appreciate the frank discussions. And so we're going to be moving into a break, but I would encourage you to keep up the dialogue. And, you know, something that's really sticking with me, two things that are sticking with me, I think, from this morning, from Alex, who's probably tweeting me too since I hugged him aggressively. Oh, there you are, Alex. You're way over there. That, you know, just to make sure that we're solving the right problem. And I think, you know, to start, I understand, you know, start small, simple, where we can start. I would challenge everyone to bring 5 people to this conference next year, you know, and people that don't want to come, you know, bring them kicking, screaming, bring them in. They need to be part of the dialogue. And, you know, I'm hoping, you know, this time next year, I'll be able to look out and say, boy, we're baking some of this stuff into the bureaucracy. It will be absolutely wonderful. So thank you very much for the panel. It was absolutely wonderful. And Lorna, we did pretty good, eh? So please, we're going to move out. It's time for chocolate. So we're going to have an amazing break. And it's going to be build your own ice cream sundaes, complete with chocolate sauce. I think I'll just have the chocolate with a little ice cream. And please meet back here for our final keynote at 3. It's going to be wonderful. She's going to knock your socks off. Colleen McCormick talk on mobilizing minds. And before we go, I just really want to thank the Social Policy Research Network for enabling this conversation to happen year after year. It's an important conversation, and we have to continue it. And Lorna's just telling me evaluations, please. Please provide input into how we can make it better. So again, I want to just end by thanking Social Policy Research Network. Thank you very much.
Oh, really? Is that what you meant?
That was very good. You were
Wonderful. Oh, yeah, I was to be honest.
Thank you.
Yes.